Romans 1 verse 20 says this, God made everything in this world to be a reflection of His invisible qualities. Turn over there, because I'd like to do two things this evening. I'd like to unpack a little bit in Romans, and then I'd like to draw it together and give you a really sharp picture of encouragement for your life while you're here. And even if you see me in years to come, I hope that this is something that sticks with you. Romans 1 verse 20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. The language there means that literally creation itself is a poem. Creation itself is a song intricately woven together, a design intimately and intricately woven to tell a story. And that story is God's great work, God's love, God's passion, His miraculous power, and His divine nature. And because of that, all of creation declaring the glory of God, we are left without excuse in regards to looking at God. Is there a God? All of creation sings the song. Verse 21 says this, though. For although they knew God, speaking of humanity, they neither glorified Him as God nor gave thanks to Him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles and so on and so forth. Paul is speaking about our fall away from what is good, our fall away from the training, the investment, listening to what is good and right and true. And all of Romans 1 kind of unpacks that to say that when we fall away from that truth, when we fall away from what is good, we begin to walk a very different path, a very destructive path. It's a little like me taking this and saying, well, it sure looks like a coffee mug, but it explodes really well when I shoot it with a BB gun. It's a little bit what it's like. That's what Paul's trying to get across. We reap a darkened path when we reject good, when we reject truth, when we refuse to walk on a path that God has revealed in all of creation. And of course, then, through Jesus Christ. Now, you don't have to go far down this path to realize that we still do this. You look around at our world, from school shootings, motivated by deep hurts, darkened by violent video games, to affairs and sexual games fueled by soaps, romance novels, pornography, commercials, to the lying, the cheating, the negativity that comes with our human obsession of getting the latest dirt from a reality show. It's all empty knowledge. It's all foolishness. It's all things that we fill up our brain and we train our minds to think on, and at the end of the day, we have nothing to show for it. It simply saps our energy. It saps our attention. It saps our time. And at the end of the day, we go, man, what did I accomplish? Nothing. Nothing. It's empty. Verse 24 through 26 in chapter 1 there says that God gave us over to these things because humanity refused. We refused to listen to what is good, right, and true. He said, all right, fine. I'll let you experience the depths of this. Essentially, God said no, and like good children, He said no, and we said, why? And we chased the no. No, I got to know why it's a no. Tell me why it's a no. How do I understand why you said no? I got to experience it now. Why is it bad for me? And we chased the no until it became foul, it became awful, till eventually we not only do those things ourselves, but then we corral other people. Verse 32 says we try and get other people. We encourage other people to come along with us. You know, the best example of this, to see this in action, is look at children. Look at young children. I don't know about your children, but you look at young children, you say no about something. And then let them think you're not really watching. Let them, yeah, see, there you go. Case in point. You let them think that you're not really watching. And you can back me up here. You let them think that you're not really watching. Some of you are not far enough away. I mean, you'd be like, yeah, okay, we're still there. But somebody who's an authority over you says no, and then they let you think they're not watching. And the next thing you know, you're doing what? Exactly what you were told not to do. And then older kids are really great at this. Because I watched this phenomenon in action. I was studying this and I thought, And I watched this phenomenon in action with older children. You know, when you're 4 or you're 5 or you're 6, you're not real good at recruiting. But once you become 7, 9, 10, 12, 13, you get a little savvy about you and you start looking around and you go, hey, if I'm going down, I'm going to take some others with me. Because surely if I can get other people to do it too, I can reverse the opinion of those who told me no. And so you do it and you realize there's not a penalty right away and you're like, hey man, I did this and I was told not to, but hey, it was pretty cool, you want to do it too? And you watch kids, they'll do it. And then you get a little bit older, and here you are in college, you have a more refined sense of doing this. Your more refined sense of doing this is, hey, we're going out Friday night. You don't have to say anything more. Or, hey, we got invited over to Pi Kappa Delta. You don't have to say anymore. There becomes a more subtle recruiting to kind of get people to go along. Well, I was thinking maybe And then it gets a little darker. I don't know what to do. I really love him. I don't know what to do. I really love her. And we begin to walk the path and we start to gather in voices that will affirm where we are, and we get people to walk and take that responsibility with us so that if we chase the no, we're not alone. And what happens is there's a flip. And that flip comes when we begin to like the no. And sometimes it translates into our hearts being corrupted to the point where we like the attention we get for chasing the no. Getting in trouble becomes our attention, becomes the way that we get people to notice us. And so we kill the pain with the pleasure, and then we get the attention, and it just kind of fuels this whole ego. Oh, wow, it just makes me feel better. Okay, life is terrible. Kind of thing. Paul goes on into chapter 2, and this is what I want to unpack for you. In verses 1 through 11 of chapter 2, he does this. He unpacks a contrast between how God sees our path and how we see our path. Verses 1 through 3, it says, "You therefore have no excuse. You pass judgment on someone else. For what at every point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. We know that God's judgment against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere man, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you'll escape judgment? Or do you show contempt for the riches of God's kindness and tolerance and patience, not realizing that God's kindness leads you towards repentance?" And then verse 5 says this, "Because of your stubbornness and your unrepentant heart, you're storing up wrath against yourself for the day of God's wrath, when his righteous judgment will come." Now that's heavy, and we're going to get heavy for just a moment. You with me? Okay, I don't see anybody sleeping yet, so we're good. We're going to get heavy for just a moment. Bear with me. Because one of the things I'm very passionate about is that if we're going to live a life for Christ, we cannot have a life where we play the fence, where we play getting away with things or justifying things that break God's heart, and yet desiring to see God's movement, to see God's blessing in our life. We can't play the fence. And one of the strongest things Paul brings out here is to show us that God makes decisions based on truth. He doesn't make decisions based on whether he knows you really well and he knows how hard your life has been or he knows how good your life has been. The truth has already been set. God already knows what is true. And when he looks at the decisions we make, he says, don't go down that path. Not, well, I think I'll bend the rules just because that person's a little special to me.